To the ISC MSR seminar series, and today I'm very excited to introduce our speaker Arindam Khan. The last time I remember, he's still an assistant professor at the CSA department. He did his undergrad at IIT Kharagpur and he did his PhD at Georgia Tech. And his current research interests include approximation algorithms, and online learning, apart from other interests. So Arindam has produced some very nice results in all these topics, one of which he'll talk about today. And he's a recipient of the Best Paper Award at MFCS 2020. Apart from this, Arindam is very active on Quora, and in fact, he's one of the top writers there. So we have a social media influencer among us. And in fact, in the past, he has written many sports articles for a Bengali newspaper as well. So coming to the topic of today, so this problem of MISR, which he'll talk about, is one of the big open problems in computational geometry. And in fact, it has seen interest in the wider theoretical computer science community as well. This was one of those notorious problems which was open from a long time. And in the last few months, this has seen an exciting progress, and especially by Arindam and his co-authors. So the stage is all yours, Arindam.
Thank you so much for such a long and generous introduction. So this talk is on approximation algorithms for maximum independent set of rectangles. It's a joint work with a group of co-authors, Waldo Galvez from TU Munich, Madhusudan Reddy, whom you might remember. He was an Narendra summer intern here at Kharagpur, from Kharagpur, and recently he has joined CMU as a grad student. Matthew Mary from University of Warsaw, Poland, Tobias Momke from Germany, and Andreas Wiese from Chile. So this is the first collaboration of mine which spans over 4 continents. So let's start with the classical problem of maximum independent set. So in independent set, we're looking for some set of vertices in a graph such that no two vertices are adjacent. So think of a star graph. You can take the center vertex or you can take the leaf vertices. Any of these two sets are independent sets because there are no two vertices which are colored red that are adjacent. And as the name MIS says, the goal is to find the maximum sized independent set. For example, if you have a hypercube, there are many different independent sets. In this example, there are many, but we want to return this kind of sets with cardinality 4, which is the maximum size independent set in this case. Now, it's a classical NP-hard problem. And for that reason, we will study approximation algorithms. And those of you who are not familiar with approximation algorithms, let me remind once more. So it's a maximization problem. So opt_i is the optimal solution on instance I, and algo_i is the solution returned by algo on instance I. So for all input instance I, if opt_i is at most alpha times algo_i, where alpha is more than or equal to 1, then we call algorithm to be an alpha approximation algorithm. And as it's a maximization problem, opt_i is always greater than or equal to algo_i. So our goal is to get alpha as close to 1 as possible. And for this problem, it's trivial to get an n approximation. So you have n vertices, and if you choose just one vertex out of it, it's independent set, you get a n approximation. So optimal could be n, but you already have 1, so it's n approximation. And surprisingly, it turns out it's difficult to improve furthermore. So it's actually NP-hard to get n to the power 1 minus epsilon approximation. Celebrated result by Hastad, which shows this. So I'll try to keep this talk informal. So if you have any question, please feel free to stop me at any point and ask a question. In fact, the result I'll talk about, it's probably, it should be accessible to undergrad. So if you have any question at any point of time with the proofs, etc., please feel free to stop me and ask questions. So as we saw, MIS is a hard problem. People are interested to study the problem for special class of graphs. So one such class is called geometric intersection graph. So in this kind of graph, the nodes correspond to geometric objects like polygons or spheres. And if two objects overlap, you create an edge between the nodes. So for example, let me motivate the problem from social distancing. So think of our office space, and there are these chairs where people can sit. And if someone is in a chair, then there is some, let's say, 6 feet radius within which you don't want to enter. So each of these chairs has some kind of a sphere of, let's say, radius 6 feet or 4 feet, depending on where it is. And you want to select a subset of chairs such that people don't influence each other. So there is this influence zones of 6 feet radius. They're non-overlapping. So you can state it from a graph theory point of view that I can create a node for each of these seats, and then if for two seats the influence zone is overlapping, I create an edge between them. So that gives us a graph. Now the question is, in this graph, can we find the maximum independent set? And that's equivalent to saying find the maximum set which are non-overlapping. So if you look at the independent set in this case, with this, so previously it was this, taking some lag. Okay, yeah, previously there are overlaps, but if I take this set, now there is no overlap. These are disjoint, non-overlapping. This is an independent set. And now also, if you think from graph theory point of view, if I think of this node, this node, this node, this node, this node, this node, so this node, this node, then not this one. Then again, these are independent sets. They don't have any edge between them. So that's our goal. Now, for simple objects, it is kind of easy to see how to solve it. So let's start with intervals. So if you have intervals, then you can solve the problem in real time. Yes.
Just a quick. Yeah. So like this might be like whether it's a geometric intersection graph or not efficiently, or is that?
I could not hear the last part. Can you repeat? What's the question?
So I guess from a geometric setup, you're going to so modeling it as a graph theoretic problem. My question is, like, if I give you a graph and then ask, is this a geometric intersection graph or not? Does that admit a efficient algorithm?
So there is something called boxicity of a graph, and Professor Sunil Chandan has some work on this, where you can relate, given a graph, how to find if it's a geometric intersection graph or not. But yeah, it's not, I think, polynomial times all over. It's also NP-hard problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
so
you are sort of
yeah. Sorry.
You're assuming that the specification is in terms of these geometric and then you are.
It depends on the geometric objects you're taking, and also it's always not possible, right? So, for instance, yeah, if you want to take box representations,
right,
it depends on the dimension, right? If you fix the dimension,
right,
only a class of graphs can be represented, and even that is right, not polynomial and all.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, so we'll only focus on some geometric objects. So let's say intervals, then squares, and then rectangles. Finally, we'll study rectangles. But to go to rectangles, let's go via interval. That's the simplest case. So for intervals, the question is, you are given a set of intervals, and let's say you have a real line here as below. So there are time steps, and the intervals are some kind of jobs which require some amount of time interval. And what you want is you want to schedule as many jobs as possible. So that turns out to be the question, like you want to schedule, you want to find, given a set of intervals, you want to find the maximum number of non-overlapping intervals, or in other way, you're trying to find the maximum independent set in the intersection graph of intervals. And this is a famous problem called interval scheduling. When we study undergrad algorithms or graduate algorithms, in dynamic program or greedy algorithm, it's one of the first problems that we study. So given a set of intervals, you want to find the maximum number of intervals which are disjoint. So anyone remember the algorithm, greedy algorithm, how it works?
Yeah, I mean, the n time first kind of
Exactly.
selection.
So
Like sweep from left to right.
right, exactly. So you start from left to right, and then you look at what among these jobs, which one has the smallest end time or finishing time, and you take that and continue. So if you do that, you will get these three sets to be the maximum independent set. So what happens is you start with the first job, and then you continue the scanning, and at this point it's ending. So you will take the first job, and then you continue the scanning, and you cannot take this two because it was overlapping with the first job. So then you can continue scanning, and then second job that finishes is this one, the red one, and you continue, and then finally you select this one. So there are three jobs which you can find. So it's a polynomial time solvable problem, and it's even greedy, simple greedy works. Now next is probably slightly harder case when you have squares or spheres. So sphere was this example circle in 2 dimensions, but if you have squares or spheres, it's again kind of easy, and there's a known result around 20 years ago that you can get a polynomial time approximation scheme or PITAS or 1 plus epsilon approximation for this kind of objects. So you can get as close to 1 as possible for this kind of objects. But even for squares, it is NP hard. So in this talk, we'll focus on a particular class called rectangles. So maximum independent set of rectangles. Now the reason it is kind of interesting is it's one of the simplest class for which you don't have a PITAS, and we expect a PITAS, and that made this problem important. So in this problem, you are given a set of n axis parallel input rectangles, and your goal is to find a set of non-overlapping rectangles of maximum cardinality. So think of this example. So we have some rectangles here which are overlapping. Equivalently, you can create a geometric intersection graph where for this rectangle you can create this node, for this rectangle you can create this node, for this rectangle you can create this node, and so on. And if two rectangles intersect, you create an edge between them. And finally, your goal is to find a set of non-overlapping rectangles of maximum cardinality, or equivalently, the maximum independent set in the geometric intersection graph. So in this example, this will be the geometric intersection, the maximum cardinality non-overlapping rectangle. So 3 is the answer. And this problem has many applications. I will not focus on applications, but in map labeling, data mining, resource allocation, and so on. So let me give one example application. So think of a resource allocation problem where the y dimension talks about bandwidth. So you want to get some bandwidth for some resource for some purpose, and then the x dimension talks about time. So then the problem says that you are, in this case, you are given a multiple set of jobs, and each job requires some amount of bandwidth for some fixed amount of time. So the bandwidth requirement is the height, and the time requirement is the width. And your goal is to schedule as many jobs as possible. So you want them to be non-overlapping, because if they're non-overlapping, that means they don't share the same timeline and they don't share the same resource. So at the same time, same bandwidth is not used by two jobs. Okay. So is the problem definition fine, or any question till now? Yes, there is a question.
So, could you point out a specific reason why, why the problem of finding polynomial time approximation for rectangle is so difficult as compared to a square or a circle?
Yeah.
So, for example, for squares we have a PITAS, but for MISR we expect a PITAS. I will tell what do I mean by expect a PITAS, but we don't have a PITAS. So formally we don't know if it is harder or not, but algorithmical difficulty comes from the fact that for squares the degrees of freedom are less. So it has one dimension, and both sides are, it's 2 dimension, but both sides are same value. So it has only 1 degree of freedom. So you cannot really increase 2 dimensions independently. So the interactions between the rectangles or squares are simple. You will not have complicated intersections. Whereas in case of rectangles, the intersections can be quite complicated. So think of a case like this kind of crossing intersections are quite possible in rectangles, whereas these are not possible for squares. Because for squares, it's like this. The crossings will not occur. Okay, so we'll see. I mean, there are some. Yeah, was there a question? So yeah, we'll see that for squares, a lot of properties we can use which are not possible for rectangles, because rectangles, the both sides can be arbitrarily different, and that can create quite complicated intersections, and that creates problem. Okay, so the definition of the problem is clear.
And Arindam, in the squares version, it's of course possible that the squares are of different side length. Like it's a square, but all the different squares can have different.
They can have different.
That okay.
Okay.
And here again might be sort of going ahead, but if all the rectangles are of similar, like of the same dimension, then it's again back to a simpler problem, right? Because you can sort of scale the axis to make them all squares.
Right. So in case the ratio of width by height is within a constant factor for all rectangles, then actually modify the square algorithm and you can get a pitas again. And what you can get a simple log n approximation for rectangles using the fact that the rectangle sizes, you can make sure that they're between 1 to 2n. I'll say why it is true. And then you can create a logarithm size group between 2n to n, n to n by 2, and so on. So within each group, the rectangles will be square-like, and you can solve them using pitas. So there are log n groups, and you will get a log n approximation based on that. So there you can get log n approximation for rectangles using the constant approximation for squares, for example.
Okay.
Right. But I'll come to that in later part of the talk. So MISR was studied from 1980s, and the problem was known to be NP-hard at that time from clique problem, and then there are several log n approximation known for this problem independently. And then in SOTA 2001, Burman showed that though it was known to be having C log n approximation ratio, the constant C you can make arbitrarily small. So you can have log n to the base k approximation algorithm where the runtime becomes n to the power function of k, but you can choose large k and then the constant becomes as small as possible. And there was some more progress. If the clique size in the graph, intersection graph is q, you can get 4q algorithm. And then Marx showed in ESA 2005 that even for squares, the problem is W1 hard. It's a complexity class from parameter is complexity, but it has implication in approximation algorithms. So it showed that if the problem is W1 hard, then the problem admits no epitas. By epitas, I mean there is no 1 plus epsilon approximation for this problem in runtime, which is function of epsilon times n to the power constant. And this constant, the exponent, is independent of epsilon. So you will not have this kind of algorithm for MISR. But it does not rule out pitas yet. And then we got a log n approximation for the problem by Chalam-Suk and Chuhai, which used LP and gave this beautiful log n approximation algorithm. And then there is a breakthrough in 2013 where we got a QPitas, which is quasi-polynomial time approximation scheme. Is my screen visible or?
I don't know. Maybe something happened.
Yeah. Let me again share it. Something happened and stopped share.
He said breakthrough and something broke.
Yeah. Now, right?
So as you're loading the screen, the W1 hardness result is with respect to which parameter?
Okay, so the K is opt. Yeah, I should have mentioned. So the parameter is opt.
Okay.
Number of rectangles in the optimal solution. Yeah, so we got a QPitas, which means we have a 1 plus epsilon approximation in n to the power poly log n by epsilon time. And it has implication that it shows that MISR is not APX hard unless some complexity theoretic assumptions are true. And then there was further improvement by Chuhai and NA, which showed 1 plus epsilon approximation in n to the power poly log n by epsilon time. But it's still not polynomial. The exponent is log n, poly log n. So for this problem, because of this q p-task, we expect there should be a p-task, but for a long time there was no constant approximation, which was known. And that was one of the open problems in the area, first to get a constant approximation. So very recently, a breakthrough, a seminal paper by Mitchell showed a 10 approximation for the problem. It's a beautiful result, but unfortunately, one problem is it relies on heavy case analysis. So there are more than 60 case analysis, and it's difficult to get the intuition why it was there. So Mitchell is one of the legends in our field. He is the Cordell Prize winner for Euclidean TSP and so on. So he told me that he was trying to solve this problem, and whenever he was trying to solve one case, there was some problematic case which was coming. So he was going to that case and trying to solve it. Then another case was coming, and he continued doing it for 60 cases, and finally it worked out perfectly. But it was not giving us insight, and it's quite complicated. The analysis is quite complicated. So the question is, can we get a simpler and improved approximation for the problem? In this talk, we present polynomial time 2 plus epsilon approximation. So epsilon is a small constant, any small constant, say 0.001 or something. At runtime will be n to the power function of epsilon. And for the result, I'll say two steps. So first step is, it's quite common in this kind of problems that first we show some kind of a good structured solution. It's an existential result that will show existence of a good structured solution. And then we will show a DP-based algorithm or dynamic programming-based algorithm, which will find such a good, which will find the best such structured solution. So what do I mean by good and structured will be clear later, but I can give you an intuition what is happening. So if you look at the problem of independent set, there are n rectangles. So there are 2 to the power n possible subsets. The number of possible candidate solutions, it could be exponential, 2 to the power n. So what we want is, we want some kind of structured solution such that the size is not too much. It's small size, it's a polynomial sized. And we can search over the structured solution easily by dynamic program. So S can be kind of searched easily by dynamic program, but also we need a good approximation. We cannot just take any S because that will not work. So what we want is, for any candidate solution, there should be some structured solution such that the structured solution is a subset of the candidate solution, and it's a good approximation. It's within alpha factor of the original solution. So think of MISR problem. So let's say a candidate solution is opt. So we are claiming I don't have to look for opt, but I just look for the solution best structured solution, that is I prime, and I prime is a subset of opt. So it's actually still a non-overlapping set of rectangles, and it is large enough. So let's say alpha equal to 2 plus epsilon. Then we claim that it's within a 2 plus epsilon factor to the optimal solution, and we'll be fine. And the second part, we show dynamic program to find the best structured solution. So if step 1 is true, the existence is true. So are you able to see my screen or not? So Aviru is saying he is not able to see.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah. So the second step is DP-based algorithm that finds the best structured solution. The algorithm. So high level idea is this. I will go to the details of this. And this is kind of nice because already 2 approximation is best known even for axis parallel line segments. So think of this kind of a case where we have axis parallel line segments. So line segments are either vertical or horizontal, and the verticals can overlap, and horizontal and vertical can also overlap. And you want to find the best maximum independent set in this intersection graph. So in this problem also, the 2 approximation result is best known. And in fact, that's quite simple. So anyone can tell me how you get 2 approximation for axis parallel line segments?
Oh, can you just look at the vertical and the horizontal separately?
Exactly. So you can either look at the vertical or horizontal and run the interval scheduling problem, polynomial time, and then return the best solution. So you get that is kind of saying that prove the case of and 2 plus epsilon. So in this talk, I will present a 6 approximation, which is simple enough. The 2 is slightly complicated, so 6 is quite simple to be stated in half an hour. So first, let me talk about what is structured solution. I was talking about structured solution, and for that, let me take a detour and first talk about guillotine cuts. So guillotine is a famous object used in French Revolution, named after Dr. Guillotine, some physician who wanted to have like a painless death, and it was actually quite recent, until 1981 or something, that it was being used in France. Now here also we use guillotine cuts, which divides an object into 2 parts, and it's cut by a straight line. So let me define what is guillotine cut. So guillotine cut is an end-to-end cut along a straight line, which divides a rectangular piece into 2 smaller pieces. So think of the whole large piece, capital P. If I draw this red guillotine cut, we get 2 pieces. One is on the left side P1, other one is on the right side P2. And it's practically quite relevant. So in cutting stock problems where you want to cut out some amount of geometric objects under some constraints from large source material like glass, rubber, metal, wood, or cloth, there this kind of cuts are being used. And in practice, a lot of machines are there which can only start at one point and completely go to the other endpoint. It cannot turn. So for those kind of cases, it's quite used in practice. It has lower cost, and also it's easy to program as well. So it has some programming from column generation techniques and so on. So in fact, in last few years, there are 100+ papers in operation research and practical algorithms which studies guillotine cut properties for cutting stock problems. Now, what we want is a series of guillotine cut such that we can separate out all the rectangles or a large number of rectangles. So think of this case. So first maybe I cut like this, the red cut. So it goes through one rectangle, so that is killed. It's kind of wasted. But then I got 2 pieces, and within each piece again I can do end-to-end cut. So maybe the right side I do an end-to-end cut like this, and the left side piece I do an end-to-end cut like this. Still not coming. And we continue doing such cuts. And at the end of all these operations, finally, if you see all the other rectangles apart from the rectangle R2, they are enclosed in one piece. So each piece contains only one rectangle, so they are separated. So if you do this, then objects are separated, then you can cut out them, and you can do your cutting stock problem. And this has also very nice connection with many other problems. For example, Bansal, Lodhi, and Sviridenko gave an AP task for guillotine bin packing problem in FOX 2005, and there was a conjecture which, if that is true, their algorithm along with the conjecture will imply the best approximation algorithm for 2-dimensional geometric bin packing. Similarly, for 2D knapsack, recently we gave a PP task or pseudo polynomial time approximation scheme guillotine 2D knapsack problem with a couple of interns from IIT Kharagpur, Arnab Maiti, Amartya Sharma, and Andreas Wiese. And also for 2D script packing, recently showed another pseudo polynomial time approximation scheme with the interns and Aditya Lodkar. So all these problems shows that if some conjecture is true which relates any packing with guillotine packing, you can get the best approximation algorithm for this problem. So for this reason, guillotine cuts have received a lot of attention recently in approximation algorithms. Now, what is the property of, so why I call it structured? What is the property that guillotine cuts have? So any cutting sequence, you can think of a binary tree. So each node corresponds to a rectangular region, and then when we cut it, we get 2 pieces. And so think of the first piece was P, and then we got this piece which is P1 and this piece which is P2. So P1 and P2 are 2 children, and you continue doing it further, right? So I cut it like this here, and I got 2 pieces, and I continue. So it's basically a binary tree decomposition kind of stuff. And then each non-leaf node, it corresponds to a region, and the guillotine cut partitions a region into 2 smaller rectangular regions, and they are the children of the non-leaf node. And finally, we stop when the leaf node contains exactly 1 item. So this gives us a powerful structured property, which I'll explain why it's useful. But this nice binary decomposition helps us. Now we call, there is a lag always. So a rectangle is extracted if it is not killed and if it is only rectangle is subpiece. So as I mentioned in this example, we can extract 7 rectangles by this sequence of guillotine cuts, and except one which is killed. So R2 is killed. And we call a configuration as guillotine separable if all rectangles can be extracted through some cutting sequence. So the question is, can we always separate out all rectangles using a sequence of guillotine cuts? And the answer is no. So there is one simple example. If you have 4 rectangles, then these 4 rectangles you cannot separate out using guillotine cuts. So you have to kill one of the rectangles, whatever way you cut. So next question is, okay, can we separate a large fraction of rectangles? At least in this example, out of 4, we can separate out 3 rectangles. So can we always do that? So that's the question which we'll study. So the question is, can we separate out a constant fraction of rectangles using a sequence of guillotine cuts? So right now, what I'm talking is only about guillotine cuts. I'm not talking about independent set. I will tell the connection later. But in guillotine cuts, we are actually starting with a set of non-overlapping rectangles and trying to separate them using set of guillotine cuts. Whereas in independent set rectangles problem, we start with a lot of intersecting rectangles, overlapping rectangles, and try to find the maximum independent set. So it's not clear what is the connection between them. So for now, I'm just talking about guillotine separability, and I will tell the connection in a few minutes. So Park and Tardos conjectured that you can always
So before you go, so for this question, like it's explicit that the rectangles are like that's the only. So you are given. This is more of an existential question. You don't want.
Yes.
You don't care about the algorithm as such. I mean, right now.
But actually, there is an algorithm, simple algorithm in order n to the power 4 time, which can find the, if there is a guillotine separation, you can actually find out. And the reason being, I mean, in each step, there is only
right
cuts you can try out. And if it is guillotine separable, you can actually find it. That is the property I was mentioning, which is useful.
Okay.
But for now, I don't care about algorithm. For now, I just want to show an existential result. Because what turns out this existential result will give us an algorithm for MISR. That I'll show.
Sure.
So Park-Tardos conjectured it to be true, and then it got a lot of attention again because it's a very simple to state problem, and surprisingly a large gap even in understanding of this problem. So it has become a big open question in computational geometry, operational research, and combinatorics. Now, recently Abed et al. Showed a hard example for guillotine separability. They showed that given n rectangles, there are instances where actually you cannot separate out more than half fraction of the rectangle. So the example first I showed, out of 4 you can separate 3, but you can actually create a perturbed grid and kind of use that gadget and create a square arrangement. So even for squares, you cannot separate out more than half fraction of the rectangles. That's the hardness side. On the other hand, in the algorithm side, Madhu presented this a couple of months back. So we can separate out actually n by log n plus 1 rectangles using guillotine cuts. But that gives a huge gap, factor 2 and log n plus 1. Question? Maybe not. Yeah, so that's the question, that there is a large gap, 2 and log n plus 1, and that's still the best known. So yes, there's a question. Agnit?
Sir, just a very naive question. So if 2 rectangles touch each other on a boundary, then is a cut allowed that runs through the boundary?
Yeah, it's a good question. I should have mentioned. So I'm assuming that rectangles are kind of open set. So if the cut goes along the boundary, it's not cutting. So if 2 rectangles are like this, actually they are not overlapping. So because their interiors are disjoint. So they're overlapping,
okay.
interiors overlap.
They're open, right? Okay.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Yeah. Thanks. So now, okay, we talked about this guillotine problem, which seems to be starting with some set of objects and your non-overlapping objects, and you are trying to cut them using guillotine cuts. But MISR was a different problem, right? So there was overlapping objects. So what's the connection? So first, assume this existential property that for any embedding of n number of non-overlapping rectangles, there are n by alpha fraction of rectangles which are separable by guillotine cuts. So take the optimal MISR solution. That's opt, and that's also non-overlapping. So I can use the property P1. And so note that the optimal solution of MISR may not be guillotine separable. They can have this kind of gadgets and they may not be guillotine separable. But the first existential property is showing that if we start with the opt solution from property 1, there is guaranteed opt by alpha number of rectangles that are guillotine separable. Okay. Now, if we show there is a dynamic program which can return the optimal guillotine separable set for MISR in order n to the power 5 time, then you will get a solution R prime which is at least as good as opt by alpha because that was already guillotine separable. And that will give you an alpha approximation for MISR. So the conjecture, which is for guillotine cutting, that for n overlapping non-overlapping rectangle, you can always separate out n by alpha fraction of rectangles by guillotine cuts. If that is true, you get an alpha approximation for MISR. In fact, if Park-Tauto's conjecture is true, you will get a 2 approximation for MISR from this. So what we're trying to do is, as I mentioned in the beginning, we were looking for structured solution, and which is a good approximation of the optimal solution. So guillotine solution seems like that. So the conjecture is that if you take any candidate solution, there is a very good solution in the guillotine separable set, which is a alpha approximation of that solution. So guillotine separable sets are a good approximation of any candidate solution. That was something which I meant by the good structured solution. So let me tell you the DP first. So in DP, we assume that all rectangles have corners in 0 to 2n minus 1 integral coordinates. And it's a simple processing. You can actually see that if I have some rectangles, it's always good to have cuts which are going through the boundary. If it is not going through the boundary like this, then actually I can shift it here or here, and I can get smaller number of rectangles to be cut. So the cuts should go through the boundary, and then if I extend the boundary edges, I get some non-uniform grid. I can transform it to a uniform grid as should come now, but yeah, here. So this non-uniform grid is transformed to a uniform grid, and I can assume this. There are n rectangles. There are 2n possible endpoints in both sides. So there are 2n cross 2n square, where all the endpoints are having integral coordinates, and this will be useful in the DP. That only 2n cuts we need to consider, not all cuts. So what's a DP? So in DP, the table will store the optimal guillotine separable set for MISR. So the entry for cell C will be for rectangular region C. So for the optimal, for the solution for the piece, actually the whole piece is called P, the whole square, whole square. Then finally our goal is to find DP of P. Now what are the base case? The base case is when a rectangular region C, like this red region, it overlaps a rectangle completely, coincide with a rectangle completely. Then we return that rectangle to be the solution. Because that's the best optimal guillotine separable set on that region. And if it does not overlap with any rectangle, it does not contain any rectangle, it can overlap but does not contain any rectangle, then we return empty set to be the solution. That's the base case. Right? Now, how do we solve the recurrent solution? So for that, we look at, there's a cell C we're interested in, and then if there is a cut that is decomposing C1 and C2, we recursively look into DP C1, the base solution in part C1 and base solution in part C2, and then look at the union. And we look at all possible such guillotine cuts and take the best of them. So there can be, so this cut was dividing into 2 regions. Similarly, this another cut, and so on. So what is the possible number of cuts? There are 2n possible vertical cuts and 2n possible horizontal cuts. So there are roughly 4n possible cuts. And what is the possible number of DP cells? So for each DP cell, we have a rectangular region. And rectangular region has 4 sides. And each of these sides, again, they're coming from this now values from 0 to 2n minus 1, so roughly order n. So all 4 sides we have n options, n to the power 4 possible, order n to the power 4 possible DP cells, and we have order n possible cuts. So the DP table size is order n to the power 5, and the algorithm is also order n to the power 5 times.
So Arindam, I have a question here. So I don't understand the fact. So here it's all overlapping rectangles right now, right?
Yes. So DP is solving the MISR. Okay, so let me go back again. So the first part, okay, still not there. So the connection between guillotine and MISR was there is an essential property. So this part we were talking about guillotine cuts. So the rectangles are non-overlapping. But when we return DP, actually that time we return optimal guillotine separable solution for MISR instance. So we have rectangle sets which are overlapping, and on that overlapping set I want to find the solution which is guillotine separable. So finally instead of returning the optimal independent set, now returning an independent set which is guillotine separable, and that special kind of independent set I can find using dynamic program in order n to the power 5 times.
Okay, so there's nothing, the merge step is very simple, you're saying. You're just saying you just try all the cuts,
Yeah.
and then those problems will just somehow give you the answer, and then you just see which one gives you the best one, right? I mean, the add up the left and the right. Okay, there's nothing special at the merge step. Okay, then I can see what's going on.
Yeah, but this is crucial to understand.
So,
yeah.
Arindam,
Yes.
P1 is just like a relaxation or is a restatement of the conjecture, right? It's just the Park-Tardos conjecture. P1, there's no the property P1 that you're assuming, the existential property.
That's the conjecture. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now actually the main part of the algorithm starts. I have 15-20 minutes, I guess. Let's see. So now the problem with this guillotine cut conjecture was that we only know alpha is less than or equal to log n plus 1. Right. So the conjecture is alpha equal to 2, but we are not able to prove it. So can we prove a simplified version of Park-Tardos conjecture, and whether that can help? So remember the structured property we had was it's a binary decomposition, in each of these sets that we are getting intermediate sets, they are rectangles. So can we generalize this idea? So one option could be, instead of binary tree, you can use k-array tree. So it makes a ternary 3-array tree. And instead of rectangular regions, I can create orthogonal polygons with t sides. So why is it helpful? So think of the case when we are discussing this kind of a gadget. So if we use guillotine cuts, we cannot separate out all the rectangles because it's very fixed. I mean, you start with some point and you have to end with the straight line. But if I use more flexibility, then I can use bends, and then actually I can separate out more rectangles. So that's the idea, that instead of guillotine cuts, now we use cuts with bends, and that can help us more. And as you see, I mean, we use now k to be more than 2. In the original guillotine problem, k was with a binary tree, and the t now we use more than 4. In the original problem, it was always rectangular, so 4 sides. But now for the 6 approximation, we will use k to be 3 and t to be 26. So it looks like this. So let's say
Steve, number of bends?
No, number of sides. So okay, it's actually number of bends also. Number of sides or number of angles or number of bends. So think of t for this object, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The number of sides.
Okay, but as long as t is constant, again you can enumerate courtesy the.
So the DP will show the DP actually will work as long as this k and t are constant. The DP will work, and that I'll show. And then we'll show that for this kind of more cuts with bends, we can have a very good approach. So this is one example where, let's say, the object, instead of rectangle, now it looks like some kind of 26 sides or some large number of sides object. And then I want to partition it. And I partition using this yellow cut, let's say, here. So I get region 1, region 2, and region 3. unlike guillotine where we had it's a binary, now it's a ternary object. And I'll show how we get this partition, etc. But then we have 3 sets, and each of them will have small complexity. So first of all, let me explain why it will work with the dynamic program, which is kind of simple. So basically, in the DP, now we are trying out all possible orthogonal polygons, and each polygon has t sides, right? So again, there are 2n possible options for each of the sides, and there are t sides, so there are 2n to the power t possible orthogonal polygons. And how many possible cuts are there? And as I showed, there are 3 regions. So there are 3t. So if I look at only the cut region, each of this cut edge is shared by 2 polygons, right? C1 and C3 or something like that. So total, you can have at most 3t number of edges because there are 3 polygons, and they are shared by 2 rectangles. Each of the edge are shared by 2 regions. So you get 3t by 2 number of possible segments in the cut. The number of possible cuts is again 2n to the power 3t by 2. And this gives you a runtime of dp, which is 2n to the power t times 2n to the power 3t by 2. So it's just extension of the guillotine case. In guillotine case, number of possible rectangles to 2n to the power 4 because number of sides were 4, and now it's t. And number of possible cuts, there was only 2n because there is only a single cut without any bend. But now we can have more bend, but the number of bend is bounded by 3t by 2. So we have this number 2n to the power 3t by 2. Total it's giving n to the power 5t by 2. So the dp will work. At least that should be fine, right? Okay. So if you use the parameter t equal 26, we'll get some runtime with n to the power 65. So yeah, it's polynomial time. The constant is large, but actually this is kind of large for now. We can actually optimize this further and get smaller value, as we will see. So now we have to show why it's a good partition. I mean, we show some kind of partitioning, but why? How can we exploit use the property of this partition and get some good approximation? So for this, we'll use recursive partitioning. And for that, I'll assume one thing, that all the rectangles in opt are maximal. By maximal, I mean if you take the optimal rectangles, you can try to grow them, and then they're touching either some other rectangle's boundary or the boundary, or the piece boundary. So this is an example where rectangles are maximal. So all the rectangles you cannot really enlarge anymore; they're touching each other. So for example, if I have a rectangle like this, it is actually not maximal, but you can try to grow it, and then it will cover the whole region, and then it will be maximal. And also we use something called nesting relationship. So our rectangle is vertically nested. In this figure, it's called blue. If its top or bottom edge is contained in the interior of some rectangle or boundary edge. So think of this blue rectangle. Its top edge is contained in the boundary. Think of any other blue rectangle, this one. Its top edge is contained in boundary of some other rectangle. So for blue, either top or bottom are nested, so it's vertically nested. For red, it is horizontally nested. So for take this red rectangle, and its side is nested on this side. So it's horizontally nested. So we'll have 3 types of rectangles. Either it's vertically nested, or it's horizontally nested, or it is neither of them, which we'll call gray rectangle. So blue, green, blue, red, and gray rectangle. So one point is, I mentioned it should be contained in the interior of this. So that means if I look at this rectangle, it is actually not nested because this part is not completely contained in the interior of the boundary edge. It is actually sharing one endpoint. So this particular rectangle is not nested vertically. It's a gray rectangle. So this definition might be, yeah, it might take some time to grasp, but it's just saying that in the vertical nested, like T kind of a structure, horizontal nested is something like this kind of structure. So one observation is it's actually partitions the rectangles into red, blue, and gray. So you cannot have both colors together. It's a partition. And we'll also assume that at most half rectangles are red. So most of the rectangles are non-red. Otherwise, you can just choose the different color. So rectangles are either blue, or gray, and that already has half of the rectangles. And then we'll show that for these rectangles, if they're cut, we will save some other rectangles. And finally, we'll show that if we start from a rectangle from some arrangement, and even if we cut some rectangles, we can save sufficient amount of rectangles. So is the definition of red and blue fine?
Yes.
Okay. So now what is red and either of them, and also let's horizontally convex and vertically convex. So horizontally convex means if you take 2 points on the polygon on the same y coordinate, and if you add them, they're completely contained in the polygon. And vertically convex is defined similarly. Fine. So all the definitions we needed, we have it right now. One more definition was needed was left vertical and right vertical edge. So if I have a horizontal convex polygon, then these are called left vertical edges. So if I move from the edge to right, I come to the polygon. And right vertical edges are those edges from which if I go to the left, I come to the polygon. If I go to right, I go outside the polygon. So just right and left vertical edges we can define on this polygon. Okay. So now what is the idea? What we're trying to do is we are trying to protect some rectangles. So in this cut, we are killing some rectangles, but we want to ensure that if we kill some rectangle, we should save some rectangles. So that at the end, for each killed rectangle, if we can save, let's say, half rectangle, that will give you 6 approximation. And we'll see the proof of that. So what we do is we call something called fences. So what we do is we look at the boundary of a piece. In the blue, in this case, it's a blue rectangle. This blue line or purple line is the boundary. And now from each point on this boundary, on the left vertical edge, we shoot a horizontal ray towards right till it hits a point P prime without intersecting any of the rectangles. So let me erase this now. Yeah. So for example, from this point, if I shoot a ray, it hits here and stop. From this point, if I shoot, it hits here and stop. So we create some fences. The idea is if I have a rectangle here and the purple cut cuts the rectangle, I create some fences which are already there, and the rectangles which have one of the either top edge or bottom edge lying on a fence, I will make sure they are not cut. And if I do that, then for each killed rectangle, I can save some rectangle, and that will help us in the charging argument. So finally, we'll use some kind of charging argument where for each killed rectangle, we'll save some rectangle. So the idea of fence is this, that from each point in the vertical edge, you shoot a horizontal edge to the right till it hits some rectangle, and then we call it to be a fence. So in this example, P prime, this line segment is called one fence. And symmetrically, you do the same from the other side. And the property or the invariant which will ensure is a rectangle is protected if its top or bottom edge is contained in some fence. Okay, so now let's look at the partitioning lemma. So we have this structural lemma that given any horizontal convex piece P with at most 26 sides, there is a cut C which has at most 8 line segments. It divides the polygon P into 3 axis parallel line segments, axis parallel polygons, and each of them has at most 26 sides. There is a single line segment L which cuts the rectangles in opt, and other this line segment L does not intersect any of the protected rectangles. So I will show if this property is true, I will get a 6 approximation. And the first, third, and fourth property is kind of easy to see why it is true. So let me define how this partitioning scheme is working now. So let's start with the polygon. We assume that it has at most 26 edges, right? the complexity is bounded. So how many vertical edges it has? It has at most 13 vertical edges. So you look at the left vertical edge and right vertical edge. So there are at most, I mean, you take the larger one, maybe the left one is higher. So you have at least 7 in this case, left vertical edge. And then you divide them into 3 groups, ET, EM, and EB. And all are kind of equal sized. Except, I mean, if you're tie-breaking, then you put the extra edge in EM. So EM is more than V by 6 ceiling, and others are just more than V by 6. And then in this red region, this EM set, I look at all the fences. There could be many fences which are sticking out here as well. Then out of all these fences, I look at the fence which has the rightmost endpoint. So in this case, this is such a fence F which has the rightmost endpoint. So from this point, I shoot a ray to the top and to the bottom till it hits some protected rectangle. So in this example, I shoot a ray and it hits the RT, which is protected because it has one side lying on a fence. So I don't want to cut this rectangle. So once I hit this, I take a bend and I just go along the fence, go out along the fence. And similarly, I hit here and I go out along the fence. So that's the cutting strategy I have. And cut C is formed by this cut. So pole cut and also this fence F, this together gives us a cut.
Can you remind how you have constructed this ET, EM, and EB?
Yes. So I start with 26 edges, at most 26 edges, and look at the vertical edges. So there are vertical edges, are those edges from which if I go to right, I go to the polygon. If I go to left, I go out of the polygon. And so there are 7 in this case, for example, such left vertical edges. And I divide them into 3 equal size groups from top to bottom. So I start ET is 2. I mean, V is equal to 13 here. So 13 by 6 is 2 and the ceiling is 3. So I want ET, the top edges. There should be 2 top edges, E1 and E2. And then there should be 3.
Got it.
There should be 3 middle edges, EM, and then there should be 2 bottom edges, EB. I define EB, ET, and EM like this. They're equal size groups, and then I do this. I look at the longest fence. I shoot a ray. If it hits a protected rectangle, I just go out like this.
Nice.
So okay, already this is easy to check that this has already the 3 properties I mentioned in the lemma. So it has at most 8 line segments because this is 1 line segment, this is the 2 line segments, and then there are this bends, 3 bends. So total 8 line segments. So in fact, that shows that the DP enumeration actually you don't need n to the power 65, but n to the power 26 for sides and 8 for the cut. 34 is fine. Then there is only a single line segment L which can intersect some rectangle, and this can intersect some rectangle. This single line segment L, because all the other edges are kind of fences or going along the boundary of rectangle. So this is not intersecting anything, or these are not intersecting anything. So we are actually going via fences, and we are not cutting any rectangle. So only one line segment can cut rectangles. Other line segments cannot cut. And even this line segment L, it is not cutting any protected rectangles because I go till I hit a protected rectangle. If I hit a rectangle, then I bend. So L is the only line segment which can cut some rectangles, but only those which are not protected. Protected ones are saved. And the second property was that the number of sides are less than 26 in all the three sets. And that's also kind of easy to see. So the reason we chose the longest fence here is F is because if I shoot this ray, it will not hit any of the fences which are coming from these red regions, because this is the longest fence, the fence with the rightmost endpoint coming from EM. If I shoot this ray, the set EM, the edges in EM, they will not go to C3. C3 is disjoint from EM. And similarly, C1, this part, is disjoint from the edges in EB. So the reason we are doing this is, if we look at this partitioning scheme, due to the cut, we are incurring some extra complexity in the polygon. So we want to make sure that though we incur an extra complexity, we are getting rid of some extra region such that the total complexity of each of these regions do not grow. So think of the case of C3. So C3, as I mentioned, in this region, due to the longest fence with the rightmost endpoint, it does not, it is disjoint from EM. So what is the number of edges in C3? So total we had in this polygon V edges, and this polygon that we construct C3, this one, this does not have any of the edges coming from EM. So it should be V by 6 here. And then we are adding some more additional edges. So this is a new vertical edge, this is a new vertical edge, and this is another new vertical edges. There are 3 new vertical edges. So total number of vertical edges we can show is still less than 13, or total number of edges remains 26. So this partitioning actually works, and you get always bounded complexity by this partitioning schema.
Hey, Arindam, so when you make these bends for protected rectangles, that does not add to the complexity. So I'm wondering, like RT and RB, they will force certain number of.
Yes. So that's what we are doing in this. So let's say we look at the region C1. So as I mentioned, it's okay. Maybe I should clear this. So let's look at the region C1. So C1 had how many edges? How many edges C1 had? So total we had B edges, and C1 is disjoint from EB. So I subtract B by 6. But due to the bend, how many new edges we add? So one edge is this one. The other one is due to the bend. There are one and two vertical edge. It means that do I add 2 new edges as you are seeing to the bend, but as I am getting rid of the vertical, I am balancing.
Got it.
Okay. So
okay.
It's the proof of the partitioning lemma, and all the properties are true. So we use the partitioning lemma recursively. So you start from some instance, you try this partitioning lemma, and then we continue in each subpiece and so on, as we did for Gilded case. And we continue doing this till each of the leaf node contains at most 1 rectangle. And we finally return all the rectangles that are in the leaf, and we want to show that this is actually more than opt by 6. So that's the final argument. And for this, we use a charging argument. So we want to show that for each killed rectangle, we are saving sufficient number of rectangles. Actually, what we will do is we'll only look at non-red rectangles. That means they are not horizontally nested, either gray or they are vertical nested like this. And for them, for each killed rectangle, we'll distribute some token to one of its neighbors, and we'll show that finally these neighbors that gets token, they are not killed, and there are sufficient number of tokens being distributed, and that will give us a guarantee.
So killed rectangles from the opt, or?
Yes. So, okay, what we're showing is, I mean, if we have opt, there is a recursive partitioning which follows this this pattern, this ternary partitioning, where each piece has at most 26 sides, and at the end you get some set of rectangles whose value is more than 1/6 of the total number of rectangles that you started with. So that's for opt, but actually what we are showing is for any non-overlapping set of rectangles, if you start with this process, you'll get a set which is more than the number of rectangles in the beginning by 6.
Okay.
So I think I am running out of time, but maybe in 3-4 minutes I can explain the charging argument. I thought I'd finish in 1 hour, but it's taking. I should have prepared better. Anyway, so let me define now how do we do this charging argument. So for this, we define something called seam, and if a rectangle sees a rectangle, it distributes its charges. So a rectangle sees another rectangle's top left corner. So think of R. Rectangle R sees the top left corner of R prime. If I draw a line joining this top left corner and any point on the boundary of this rectangle R. So basically from this point, if we stand at the boundary of this rectangle, if I look, I should see the corner. That's the idea. And there are three conditions. One is edge should not intersect any rectangle. Edge does not contain the top edge of any rectangle, and P is not the bottom right corner. And you can see this particular case is satisfying all three. So this line segment that's joining these two, it's not intersecting any of the rectangles. It does not contain top edge of any rectangle, and it's not the bottom right corner. But if you look at this point, then it is not being seen, because if I join this top corner and this, then this line contains a top edge. Or if I look at this, then this actually crosses a rectangle. Or if I look at this, it is actually it is not seeable from any interior points in the boundary. It can be seen from the corner, but we don't include them. Anyway, it's technical, but the point is if I have a rectangle, if I kill a rectangle, I show that I can create a fence from the killed rectangle to a rectangle which it was seen, and I will make sure that I don't kill the seen rectangle. So if we look at a horizontal nested rectangle like this, as you see, it cannot see any of the rectangles in the nested side. So this corner or this corner it cannot see, because yeah, it's kind of nested. But if it is vertical or gray, then it can see one corner on each side. So if it is, let's say, vertical like this, then it can see this corner, or like this, it can see this corner. So that is the point. We're using that for vertical nested rectangles. It can always see one corner on each of its side, and then you can distribute its charges to those sides, and that will give us better approximation. So first claim was this, that if R is not horizontal nested, it can see at least one corner on each side. So I'll not prove it, but as you see in the figure, it's showing that if it is the case that the rectangle R prime, if I look at a corner, and if I join, if I look at the top y coordinate of rectangle R and R prime, if they're overlapping, if they're same, then it can see these corners. And otherwise, they can see the corners like this. And this kind of cases are not possible because it's horizontally nested, and so on. So it will require a couple of minutes, but if you think, you can see that if the rectangle is not horizontal nested, it can see one of the corners on each side. And then what we do is, for each rectangle R that is not horizontally nested, and if it is intersected by a line L, we assign a fractional charge of half to a corner that it sees on left and half to a corner that it sees on the right. So if this rectangle R is getting cut by some line L, I will assign half charge to this rectangle, and maybe it has another rectangle here like this. So I'll assign half charge on this. And these two claims are useful, which show that if a rectangle receives a charge in one of its corner, it gets protected. The reason being, if I look at this rectangle, let's say, so if I look at this rectangle, this corner was seen by the cut rectangle, and when the rectangle was cut, we create the fence. And if a rectangle can see another rectangle R can see rectangle R prime, then the fence from P will go and cover the top edge of R prime. So R prime will be protected. So that is the reason of definition of seeing, that if you receive a charge, then you can protect in one of the corners, then the rectangle gets protected. And then the second claim we can show is actually each corner is charged at most once. It cannot get more charges, because if you look at this rectangle, this gets charged from this only when it is being cut, and this is the first rectangle which hits this ray. So if it is getting charged from two rectangles, then you can show it's not possible, because then possibly the other rectangle was here, and then the rectangle which was cut, it would have already received the charge from the cut rectangle.
But could R prime get cut later in the recursion?
Which one?
R prime. Okay, in this one it's not getting cut, but later it
R prime gets protected. So if it gets charged, it gets protected. I don't kill it in the future, and that gives us the power.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit fast, so I understand that it's difficult to understand the last part. Maybe I should have taken 1.5 hours, then it would have been better. But So now we are done. So we have all the ingredients to show off by 6. So remember that we lose a factor 2 in the beginning. We assume that we have either horizontal nested or vertical nested and gray rectangles and look at the larger size class. So it can be in the worst case equal size, so you can lose a factor half. But then for each non-horizontally nested rectangles, what we showed here in claim 3 that each corner is receiving at most charge once. So it receives half charge. There are 4 corners. So you can receive charge 2. Each of these rectangles can receive at most charge 2. So if there are k number of non-horizontally nested rectangles that are cut by vertical lines, then if they save t rectangles, so because if a rectangle is getting charged, then it's protected. So there are t rectangles that are getting saved, and these t rectangles can have at most charge 2. Each of them can have at most charge 2. If there are k rectangles killed, total charge that is coming, it should be it's at most k by 2. And then if you do the analysis, I mean, do the little bit of algebra, you will see that t by k plus t is more than 1/3. In other way, all the rectangles which are left, which are non-horizontal nested, you can save 1/3 of such rectangles. So totally you save 1/6 of the rectangle. So for each killed rectangle, we are ensuring that it is giving half charge here, half charge here. And then for this rectangle, it can get at most 4 charges from 4 rectangles. So this rectangle can get 2 charges, right? So if I look at the number of killed rectangle, if I kill, let's say 2 rectangles here, 1 and 3, they together will save at least 1 rectangle. So roughly out of 3 rectangles, I'll save 1 rectangle. So 1/3 is saved and half is lost in the first step. Totally you lose 1/6 factor. So that's for the 6 approximation. And for 2 plus epsilon, it's more complicated. So it's more complicated charging argument, more general polygons, and more general fences. And so this is a picture drawn by one of the co-authors, Matthew, where it can be very, I mean, it may not be horizontally convex. It can be arbitrary axis parallel polygons, and then you define similar LT, LM, LB, and the charging arguments are different. And the fences now, instead of one line segment, it can have multiple bends. And with 1 by epsilon bends, you can get 2 plus epsilon approximation. So already I'm over time, so I'll not go into details. So let me just mention about MISR weighted versions. Our techniques don't extend to MISR weighted case, and for this, actually, the best one is log-n. It's an open question how to improve that, and it is also connection with chromatic number and click number of a graph, and there are conjectures relating that. If you want to talk about this, yeah, we can talk offline more about this. And finally, the open problems are PITAS for MISR, resolution for Park-Trados conjecture, extent for higher dimensions, instead of rectangles in 2 dimensions. What about higher d-dimensional hypercubes? And then for arbitrary line segments, what can you do? So all the problems we talked about, they're axis parallel. The rectangles are axis parallel and line segments are axis parallel. But if you have arbitrary line segments in any orientation, then actually surprisingly, we still have a QPITAS. Actually, we have a quasi-polynomial approximation scheme even for this arbitrary line segment case. But the based on a polynomial approximation is n to the power epsilon factor. So it's another open question that can we get something given log n in this case? Because we expect a PITAS and the based on approximation is n to the power epsilon and it's open for a long time. Okay, sorry for exceeding the time. Thank you. Any other questions? I'll be happy to answer.
So going back to the just as an intuitive guide. So you said there's this n by 2 counterexample for the Park-Trados conjecture. I think it was Abel, Abed, I forget the name.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a pinwheel kind of a structure, blocks of squares.
Right.
Yes.
And here it's easy to see why adding complexity helps you. Like why having, say, more number of sides lets you extract, or
Exactly.
even here.
In fact, for this example, you show that if you have 1 by epsilon bends, then you can retrieve 1 plus epsilon fraction of the rectangle. So that's another conjecture I will say, which I have is instead of guillotine cuts, if you use this kind of bends, if you allow 1 by epsilon number of bends, then we should be able to do 1 plus epsilon approximation for MISL.
Got it. Okay.
But the barrier of two from our analysis is because of the charging argument. The way, so the algorithm that we have, I think that might already give a PTAS or something close to PTAS, but the analysis is not yet there.
And like you lose a 2 right out in this blue-red selection, or is it more the the charging argument?
Yeah, so so initially we had 6 approximation, then we had 4 approximation. We used more charging and then 3. So all these 4, 6, 4, 3 use the same idea of vertical nested, horizontal nested, but the 2 plus actually did not use that. It's slightly different. There also we do a partitioning, but it's not those kind of nesting argument. But we lose because of different reasons. So it's not that we only take vertical nested or horizontal nested, but for a different reason there. But still, I mean, the argument is you will not improve even for line segments. You will not improve factor 2. So to break, because all this charging argument or nesting or whatever I am saying, they only make sense for rectangles, not for line segments. So breaking factor 2 will need new techniques.
And for the slightly different question. So for the the axis aligned line segments, what is the best known guarantee, approximation guarantee?
So 2 approximation is the best known, even that case.
So even there, a PTAS isn't.
Yeah, so we have some special results. So you can get a PTAS for axis parallel line segments if all the line segments are similar in length. Then you can get a PTAS. But for arbitrary length line segments, we are still not there.
Okay. Yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I should have planned better. I thought I'd finish in 50 minutes, but it took 90 minutes almost. So last part, I was hurrying. Yeah.
No, too many questions, but that's a good sign, I would imagine.
Yeah, I could have broken into 2 parts and maybe 2 hours it would have been clearly explained. But last part I kind of hurried and maybe it was not so clear.
No way. I'll stop recording. I guess if others have questions, they can continue to ask. But yeah, for the time being, I'll stop recording.